This video covers how adding formulas into Excel allows it to do calculations for you automatically. So I'm going to start really simple here with a list, and you can see I have red and white wine, and I'm going to just pretend that this was for events and I'm tracking for that reason. But you could pretty much track anything, and this example could be used in many ways. It's just for informational purposes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to basically say, here's my starting inventory. I have 9 bottles here and 6 here. That's basically all I did. Is just added a 9, added a 6. And you can see up here, those are literally just numbers. But what we're going to do is basically we want to say, okay, well, what happens when I use some? How do I keep track where I don't have to count everything every single time, and how can I, have a running track of that? So I'm going to right click on the letter above that category, that title, and say insert, and that'll insert a column before. So before the red wine, I'm going to say usage. So I'm going to assume that I'm going to have events where I use red wine, and I want to be able to subtract so I can track that. I'm also going to do the same for white wine just to make it easy. And I'm going to say usage. And then here, I'm going to put in a number. So I'm going to start with the next date because I'm going to assume this is my starting inventory. And I'm going to say, okay, I have events every week, and I want to track how much I use per week and different things like that. So first I'm going to say, okay, the first event I used 2 bottles of wine. And first and foremost, we need to format the cells. So initially when you start putting numbers in, they always in Excel turn them into dates. So we're going to come in here and we're going to say number. And in this instance, because it's bottles of wine, I'm going to use 0 decimal places. You can leave this if you want, if what you're doing requires decimal points or decimal points make sense. But in my example, I'm going to say it doesn't make sense. So I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to do the same thing for this column. So if you see my arrow above the title and the letter, I'm right clicking and I'm selecting Format Cells, Number, and I'm dropping the decimal points. Same process, but it's important that you click above the title, not here, because if I click here, I'm only going to do this one cell. Where if you see how when I click here, it selects that entire column. Same thing with rows. If you click here, it takes an entire row. If you click somewhere out here, you're only going to get the single cell. Okay? So once I have this, now I have my original inventory. I have some usage, and I'm going to enter down, I'm going to add, I'm going to say the next event, there was a lot more people, and then after that was a really small event. So now I have some usage. Unfortunately, my red wine, it's not calculating. It's not doing any calculations for me because I haven't entered any formulas. So the way to enter a formula is start with the equal sign. And what I'm going to say is the easiest way to do it, instead of typing out C2, is just clicking on the cell. And now you can see that entered that up here. And I'm going to say subtract this number. So in other words, this says, if I go back up to it, you can see here's this formula. What it's saying is that the number I want here is my original inventory minus my usage. And then you just hit the enter button and it automatically does the calculation for you. Now I don't want to have to do this every single time. So what you do is you click on the cell with the first formula. You go to the right corner till you get that black plus, and you left click and hold and drag. And then you let go when you get as far as you want to go. And as long as I continue to put numbers in here, that calculation will continue, and it automatically adjusts for the cells. So you'll see this one is C2 minus B3. The next one's going to be C3 minus B4, and so on. So Excel does try to automatically figure out what you're trying to say with the formula rather than copying the formula over and over and over again in the same formula. That wouldn't really give you what you're looking for. So it does sort of do some intuitive adjusting to what it thinks that you're looking for. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to add some usage, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add the formula, so it's equals, and then this first inventory item, subtract our usage, and just hit enter. And then I can just left click and drag. Now you can see I have some negative numbers because what are we missing here? We're missing adding inventory, right? If I'm using inventory, obviously over time, I'm going to have to add inventory. I'm going to run out. So the way that we're going to do that is right click again before the red wine. So I'm going to say insert, and this time I'm going to say purchased, which means I'm adding to my inventory. And I'm going to add some numbers, and I'm going to say I didn't need to do any of that until here, and I'm not going to be doing it all the time, but sometimes. I'm going to say it like this. But did you notice my numbers didn't change because my formulas are still what they were to begin with. They don't represent this new column that I added. Now the numbers changed, if you'll notice. Again, Excel's intuitive, so it turned this from C2 to D2, still minusing the usage. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify this formula, and we're going to add any inventory. And even though there's nothing in that inventory box, I want to add that very first line because I want to copy the formula all the way down. So I'm going to hit enter. Then I'm going to go back up to this box, and again, always the black plus in the right bottom corner, drag down, and now my numbers have adjusted. So as I did more usage, the same thing's going to happen. Numbers are going to drop down. You can see the whole list changes as I do that. Same thing over here. I'm going to right click on the top and say insert. I'm going to add in a title. Oops. Always want to make sure it makes sense so everybody who follows behind you can figure out what you're trying to say, and that may even be you later on. And then again, we're going to change our formula. So we're just going to modify. We're going to say plus whatever inventory we may have added, and we may or may not in each column. But if we put it at the very first formula and click and drag all the way down, then our formula is going to be accurate for every cell, and that's what we want it to be. The other thing you can do is at the bottom, you could say these are weekly events. You could say, I want a summary of basically what's my average usage per week. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the formulas, and we're going to click on this auto sum button, and we're going to say average, and that'll give us the average of what we used for every event, or for our weekly events in this instance. So we're going to click average, and Excel's going to guess what numbers you want to cover, and these are the numbers we want to cover, and we're going to say enter, and it's going to say, okay, on average you use 2 bottles a week. Now if we wanted to be more specific, on this one, if I right clicked on this cell and said format cells, I could give it a couple decimal places, and that would give me a little bit more accurate of a number. That's totally up to you. Those are all preferences, but that's going to give you an idea of what you've done and how you can basically add formulas very easily. So from the home screen, there are some formulas that are available way over here. The auto sum is over here. I could have used it from there, but it's sometimes easier to go to the formula bar and see the auto sum as well as recently used, and then you can get into some really advanced functions and formulas if you have time and you want to learn those. But this is a small way you could get started with Excel and use some simple functions to track inventory. You could track sales, you could track events, you could track how much spending you have. And this example, by showing you how to do an average, shows you how you could use that on any type of data that you're collecting. So you figured out how to create a function, how to modify a function, how to copy the function, as well as how to do an average. And that's how Excel can help by automatically doing calculations for you that you might otherwise spend time doing. This is a really easy way to use things like this to help kind of manage some of your resources and for yourself and for your business.